we will go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining on this beautiful Friday. Welcome to September. I guess we're almost through September, but this is Jeff Dotzler. Thanks for joining this week's Coffee Break Technology Series, really focused on the cloud and the cost side of cloud and whether there's cost savings available. What are the benefits for organizations as they're seriously considering. This technology has been around for a while, but it seems to have gained some traction a little bit more as of late than it has in the past. Excited to be joined by Peter Niebler. Peter, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us as always. We're a little bit different conversation than when we were preparing, talking about people buying and selling stuff on Amazon, but I guess that's the cloud as well. But really focused on cost savings around the cloud, and you've been kind of the Elevity really cloud subject matter expert on all things cloud, and so we're happy to have you not only as part of Elevity but part of today's coffee break. And so we're really looking at how organizations go serverless, what kinds of things they need to think about, and is it only about productivity and access to better technology, or is there some really long-term cost saving benefits for organizations? So that's what we'll be talking about. Before I start peppering Peter with questions, I want to remind you that we would love to take questions directly from you. There's a Q&A icon in your Zoom control panel that if you select that, type in a question, we'll be notified and try to get those answered throughout the next 25 minutes or so. So please feel free to do that. All right, Peter, so as organizations consider the cloud, let's really start with what the different kind of types and approaches and flavors. There's some big buckets: private, public, hybrid. What are the pros and cons associated with the different approaches? What are some things that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, so when we're talking about cloud and private, public, and hybrid, that's really how they're connecting to the cloud or how they're utilizing it. So private can either be yourself with an infrastructure on premise, or a lot of people have used what are called like co-locations. That's like a data center that's near you, or that's just selling those services, as opposed to the public cloud. Then we're talking more of the big guys like Azure and Amazon, or Google, those big clouds. And then the hybrid is a mix of both, where you still have some on-premise equipment or servers or software load, but you're utilizing some cloud services as well. And you may or may not be connecting those on-premise services to the cloud, but typically when you're talking hybrid, there is some sort of connection. So like you might sync your user accounts from your on-premise AD to Azure AD, for example. The other big piece of that, so we talk like, the different types of cloud: private, public, and hybrid. But then once you're getting into that cloud, there's different ways to use it. And it's important to understand that as well. We always talk in acronyms in IT, but there's really three tiers there. There's the software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. That's how you're utilizing the cloud service. So for example, an example of that, we all use, people have like private email accounts and whatnot. That's software as a service, where you're just using the software and you don't have to take care of anything. The difference between the three levels is really how much you are responsible for. Whereas like infrastructure as a service, you're actually running virtual machines or Windows servers or Linux servers up in Azure, and you're still responsible for maintaining those servers, but the underlying hardware and hypervisor and other pieces of it are offloaded onto the cloud provider. So
yeah, so some interesting things to think about. And I think we tend to have people ask us questions when they're starting kind of their journey in the cloud process: is which provider would be best for me, or which type of cloud would be best for me? And I think we tend to say, well, it kind of depends on what you want to do with it. What are the workloads? How do you intend to use it? What's the business really going to need this for? And so what are some of the things that you guide people through as they're asking those questions?
Yeah, that's really where we start. In my opinion, I think applications drive everything. So because the businesses need their applications to run their business, and you need those to function well. So I always start there with What are your applications and how are they running now, and how would that translate in a cloud environment? So for example, you might have a line of business application that has an on-premise flavor, and they also offer software as a service. Well, that would be an easy transition right there. We've run into others a lot of times in manufacturing where there's a legacy on-premise application that just needs that local network connectivity, and so you can't move that out. So you look at moving other pieces out to the cloud. But it's not a one size fits all, I guess, is what I'm saying. And you need to take that time to look at your applications, your current workloads, kind of run through them all, put them in, categories, and see how they translate up to the cloud. And usually when we do that, we find that people end up in some kind of hybrid format. It depends how big the organization is and what their application sets are. But a lot of times they find, oh, hybrid's the best for us. We get the question of, hey, I want to get rid of these servers. I hear everybody's moving to the cloud. Do that for me. And it's best to stop and say, okay, well, how does that work? And the theme of this is cost. And that's a big component of it too, because there's a myth that going to the cloud is cheaper. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I think there are, that is kind of one of the big key questions is, if we move to the cloud, would we save money? What are some ways that organizations can get some cost savings and some benefits from the cloud? I think one of those is the scalability, right? I think that's really where we started to hear about, Amazon taking their server farms that they had to have to scale up for, the holiday season, when they're buying and their visits to their site exploded. And when they didn't have those busy times, they were using some of that workload for other people. And so there's some benefits that came from that, but maybe you can talk a little bit more and give us a more real life example than the one that I gave.
Yeah, so that's the most obvious and most used example for saving money by going to the cloud, is the ability to scale up and scale down. And that's true. It's a pay as you go type format. So for example, a retail shop that has, e-commerce web servers up there. Well, they probably only need to run, anywhere from 10 to 20% of their servers during non-peak seasons. And during peak seasons, they can easily scale up without having to buy hardware and plan for that internally. So they get a lot of cost savings because you're being charged for what you use. So scale up, scale down is a big example of that. But there's a lot of other unique ways to do that. And that's why you really got to look at the business. So for example, take like a small business, 30 employees or so. Usually what they have is 1 to 2 servers on site running about 5 to 10 virtual machines. And there's an initial getting cost to creating that on-premise environment, that hardware, that software, those hypervisors. There's whether you're a 10-person firm or a 100-person firm, there's kind of this gap where you've got an initial investment, right? And you might find in those smaller firms that moving those servers to the cloud is more cost beneficial, where move up to like a 200 or 300 user company, that might not translate as well. So you gotta really look at that. But there are cost savings in there. Another good example of that is testing things out. So developers, even just IT, your initial investment in the cloud is very minimal. You somewhat have to have a crystal ball if you're going to build an on-premise environment for the next 3 years. That's really hard to do. Whereas with the cloud, you can redirect very easily if the business is going a different way, expanding or not. And you're only going to get charged for what you do. You never bought a server, you're just renting it, for example. So I like that, and those test environments can be spun up very easily. So it's almost like just a small cost rather than trying to purchase something that then might have to go through some red tape within the company. Whereas, hey, can I spin up this server for a day and it's going to cost $30? That's an easy no-brainer to do.
Yeah, and something we're seeing at being deployed at a kind of an increasing rate as people, once they realize they have that ability and work through the initial steps to have the connectivity and the security and all of the things that need to be in place, that gets used a fair amount once organizations have taken that initial step.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That I laugh to myself sometimes when people talk about the security subject, and I don't want to move the cloud because I'm concerned about security, and rightfully so. You should be concerned about the security. It's not a bad question, but the regulations and standards these cloud providers put in place versus what you would have to do to match that on premise, you wouldn't even be able to come close as a small business. So, that's another benefit you're getting from the cloud is, redundancy built in, hitting all the, standards for data centers and security. Those pieces are all put in place and you don't have to worry about them at all.
Good. I think there's obviously some of those cost saving options of the things that you just went through, but there's some operational cost savings that I think are also possible for people to consider. And again, it's not a one size fits all. Your results may vary, kind of a thing. But what are you seeing organizations benefit from this approach?
Yeah, these are what I commonly refer to as soft costs, and sometimes they're hard to quantify. But what it does is allows people to focus on the business more than the underlying technologies that are running the business. So instead of like worrying about server maintenance on the hardware side or the hypervisor side, IT staff can be working on, making the application perform better or being more highly available. Though those are that shift in focus, is sometimes hard to quantify internally as a cost, but there are some hard ones like, you can sometimes reduce IT staff. I know IT people don't like to hear that, but you can. But there's all those soft costs there, productivity going up, less downtime potential. Those types of costs are what you're seeing there.
Yeah, important things to keep in mind. Maybe not all of the reasons, not the primary reason to move in that direction, but some added benefit as you're considering it. Any other cost savings that you run into? Other things that maybe smaller items that people just need to be aware of?
One that we see a lot is people moving some in the hybrid, is you're moving like your backups or your storage to cloud storage, or your test infrastructure up there where you used to have to maintain those on site. And those types of things are very cheap and easy to implement in the cloud. So, backup is always a really good example of that. You don't have to buy all this storage, and you don't have to, a lot of times people used to rent rack space at like a colo to get an offsite backup. That was very expensive. Going with the public cloud approaches, there's good software that connects up to them. And the price per gigabyte is very minimal. Stuff you wouldn't be able to do in the past, cost wise. And then the test infrastructures, those are another piece that I see developers and stuff doing, where they can spin things up and test them very quickly and shut them down without affecting anything on premise. They used to use the on premise infrastructure to do that or set up their own tests, and they don't have to do that anymore.
Good. All right. Well, as we're moving through here, if you do have any questions, as a reminder, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function within the Zoom control panel. Drop us a question or two at something maybe we've talked about that you want some more clarity, or something totally different. We'll have a little bit of time here at the end. So I think the last thing that, when you talk about soft costs, this may be the softest of them all, but super critical, is time. Talk about time savings that you've seen with this approach that clients have benefited from once they've, once they've gone through the process of implementing a cloud approach.
Yeah, so from my perspective, you're saving time on labor and maintenance in IT. So you're not spending time updating hardware. You're not spending time updating hypervisors, and then those life cycles of those equipment goes away because you're just letting your cloud provider handle that for you. So you a lot of times you'd see every 3 to 5 years a big refresh on things, and that's no longer there. On the benefit from that, other than just the labor and maintenance time, is productivity should go up too. So less downtime potential, better performance on applications. You can be more agile as things change, and those all translate potentially to cost savings for the business.
Yeah, they sure do. And sometimes these aren't. We went through several different things, whether it's not having to have hardware, having the ability to go scale up, scale down, maybe not having to buy storage, having to buy backup, and time. None of these probably individually are, each are these huge things that push a decision one way or the other, but all added up can make a big difference. We're talking about cost savings, but a question came in: what are some examples that you've seen where there was a cost increase, where that maybe they went in thinking it was going to be cheaper, or that just made a conscious decision that it was a better approach to go to the cloud versus continuing the way they had been, and there was an increased cost? Do you have an example like that?
I do. I'm just not touching on one specific, but that has happened plenty of times where clients have moved to the cloud knowing it was going to be more expensive. We did our due diligence on it ahead of time, but either for the sake of what we've been talking about before, productivity, maybe they had a flaky internet connection at their office they were sick of dealing with and being cut off, so they moved things to the cloud. A lot of stuff happened, during the pandemic, where people would move to the cloud because people were going out remotely to their office, to their homes, or remote workplaces, and it was easier to centralize it in the cloud rather than rely on the on-premise infrastructure with that single internet connection, or that building that loses power from time to time. So those were I'm still trying to think of something specific, but I know we've come across those, that they do go more expensive, but you're getting, it's a calculated change, right? Based on the benefits you're going to get.
Yeah, and I think that's an important, part of the conversation that we want to help organizations and our clients work through is, what are the pros and cons? What are the applications? What are the workloads? What is the timing? What's the accessibility necessary? Therefore, we can make a decision about which approach makes the most sense: public, private, hybrid, which provider, all of those things, and can do the math to say, here's what you should plan for. There's some nickels that you can keep, but all the soft benefits. There's some big dollars that you can keep, plus all the soft benefits. Those are all the things that we can work through and help build a strategy around, versus it being a hope and pray option, which that doesn't usually work out very well.
Yeah, it helps to lay this out. There's trade-offs with everything, right? If you move up here and you see what works for you, and what's most important for the business.
Great. Well, I don't see any additional questions coming through. So a couple things that we did want to run through, just to some reminders and some announcements. We do have an upcoming, or we do always have events. The next Coffee Break series, some thought leadership things that are happening. We're wrapping up our fiscal year this month, in the next week. So we'll be launching some new things in the first quarter of our fiscal year, last quarter of the calendar year for everyone. Definitely some more cloud solutions. We're really excited about the Azure Virtual Desktop concept and the ability to maybe move towards an approach of no more desktops for an organization. So we'll be talking more about that. So 11it.com/events is where you can find those. Of course, we hit your inbox with those announcements as well when they come up. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which I know you all have been waiting for the month of October to get more cybersecurity awareness information. Unfortunately, this has become a increasingly important topic that everyone needs to be thinking about. We have plenty of coffee break sessions talking about security. I shouldn't say plenty, we have a lot. I don't know if it's enough. But we will be creating some really great content, some really good information that you can share with your teams. Education and awareness is the most important thing that any organization can do to ensure that your data and your users stay protected. So 11it.com/cybersecurity is the place to go. Make sure that you're going to receive that information. You can sign up for the newsletters, the information that will be coming out throughout the month of October as we celebrate Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Lastly, I know all of you came to hear about Peter and the cloud, and maybe one or two of you just want the coffee gift card. So this is where you can grab that. Grab your phone, load up the camera app, and hover over this QR code to get access to that. Or get your fingers going and type in this URL, form.typeform.com, with all that other stuff to claim your gift card. I will come back to this one and let it sit at the end. So thanks for joining us. The cloud sessions have always been popular. This one is no different. Thank you all for joining us and learning a little bit more. If we can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to your client success team, your client success specialists, your VCIO, your sales rep, your solutions architect, me, Peter, anyone who has an 11it email address. We'd be happy to help and talk through those things. And hopefully you can join us in the future for other coffee breaks. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Take care.